talk about a gentleman. We like to talk about tech, but we're going to talk about a gentleman who's worked at the top US tech companies, and now he's working for a top Chinese tech company. As you guys know, there is a competing tech battle between East and the West, China, US, whatever you want to call it, right? There's a race that's going on. US is kicking ass, but believe me, China creates very, very wonderful tech companies, but also technology as well too, that is a lot of times far more superior than what the US has and creates. What do I mean by that? Things like financial services, payments. They were using WeChat, all this stuff ahead of time, and we've been copying from the get-go. TikTok and so forth, right? Those are prime examples of companies that are leaders and have been leaders that comes from out of China. But now Americans are looking to work for these Chinese companies because they are so big. And if you're going to consider yourself to work for a Chinese company, these are some of the things that you're going to want to know. Okay? So we quit Facebook to work at TikTok. And here are some of the biggest differences that he's noticed between American and Chinese business cultures. As a Chinese tech company becomes increasingly important on a global stage, as Chinese tech companies become increasingly important on a global stage, more Americans are still interested in working for them. I spent the past 7 years working for Silicon Valley's biggest companies such as Snapchat, Instagram, and Facebook in software engineering. Guys, so this week in my coaching calls, many individuals were wanting to talk about coding in their careers, and some were in their 40s, some were older, some were younger. And I just say this, right? Many want to take a path that I've taken within my career. I think if you have the time and the bandwidth to get a strong technical foundation, there's nothing wrong with learning how to code and become an engineer, because you can really build off of that. You can really build off of that. But that doesn't necessarily have to be for you. You can go in the cloud, you can go into cybersecurity and be here and skip all of this stuff over here because this is not your thing. Now, I encourage you to look at both sides of it. You can still get to the same amount of money. You can still make a shitload of money. But if you want a strong foundation, I was talking to an architect, literally an architect who touches stuff and builds houses and stuff like that. And he's like, Antoine, I have plenty of time. I want to ultimately be remote, living in Lisbon one day in Portugal. And I want my family and my job to be fully remote. What type of tech career can I do? And he says he likes to touch stuff. And he likes to create stuff. And he likes coding. He's going to go down the engineering path. He's going to go down the engineering path. 3-4 years as an engineer, he can be making a lot of money. And he can work remote. He can work at many companies because that's a role that's going to constantly be needed. And it's also a role that's going to constantly demand higher salaries. So he spent the past 7 years working for Silicon Valley's biggest companies such as Snapchat, Instagram, and Facebook in software engineering. And my time in these companies centered around building online marketplaces and feeds. And he helped ship the initial software launch of Instagram Stories in 2016, as well as the initial launch of Snapchat's content feed. And in early 2021, ByteDance, the subsidiary of TikTok, was interested in hiring me to lead engineering efforts in building an online marketplace to connect creators and brands. And shortly thereafter, I joined ByteDance as a tech lead manager to drive efforts related to their creator marketplace. I noticed surprising differences between working for US tech companies versus Chinese tech companies. And I was able to pick up a lot of nuances in comparing the two sides due to both my time in Silicon Valley, as well as being a second generation Chinese American who has an understanding of both cultures. What he's saying are, meetings are often larger. Most meetings at ByteDance are larger, often 50 plus people and 2 to 3 presenters. This broadcast style meetings are most compatible with Chinese companies' top-down management style. So it's a difference in the US. Now, I still think most companies still operate from a top-down perspective based on where I sit in a lot of my positions in the corporations that I've worked for. There's a bottom-up, but there's more than likely a top-down. But he's saying that most Chinese companies, or the Chinese companies that he worked for, top-down management style. One-on-one meetings are smaller, sociocratic group discussions that American employees take for granted and are actually pretty rare at companies like ByteDance and TikTok. This is because organizations at TikTok are larger and less segregated. Some teams have 50 to 200 people reporting into one manager. Just imagine that, guys. One time, there would be a manager with 200 plus direct reports or 20 direct reports. I remember I had 27 at one point in time. Way too much to manage. Optimal for me is around 6 to 8, right? You can be more effective as a manager when you have little managers or little employees that report into you. Ultimate goal of management is to retain your employees and get results. How do you retain your employees? Well, you retain your employees by getting to know who they are, investing into them. You get your goals by what I just said. You invest into your employees, they're going to deliver results for you. You can't invest in 200 direct reports. So that is a difference in the cultures right there. Some teams have 50 to 200 people reporting up to one manager. That's not really management. That's just top down. That's telling people what to do. Okay? These reasons, in addition to top-down management style, lead to broadcast style meetings being more common. These meetings are often multi-time zones spanning many countries and cultures. So we wake up, use real-time video, translation software. Broadcast style meetings are more conducive to this. So you're going to get in line working for a Chinese company. There isn't going to be much feedback that you can give. You may not even know your manager. You may not ever talk to your manager. You may not even see your manager. You're just going to get what you need to do, and you need to do it. Cultural difference. Product development relies more on manpower. Due to the low labor costs in China, many Chinese internet companies have a greater reliance on manpower. In contrast, Western tech organizations emphasize a more passive and data-driven approach. Well, of course, you can afford more people in the product development, so you will have more manpower. Whereas our culture, we are expensive. We want to make the best decisions on data, analytics, and so forth. Yes, we outsource a lot of the development a lot of the times. But that's just the difference right now between where China is in their labor market and our labor market. Ours are expensive. It's very expensive. But for example, TikTok relies on operations teams to mainly bring in big influencers and advertising clients on the platform. The company also spends marketing money to understand their local markets while simultaneously hiring local employees in every major market to help internationalize the TikTok product. In 2020, TikTok created $20 million creator fund, a project led by armies of ops teams to give US creators funds to bring them onto the growing platform. So they invested into the Chinese employees, but they also invest into an operations team to help bring and build TikTok to where it is right now. The ability to leverage operations is a key reason why Chinese tech firms are able to move so quickly and break into new tech markets, something Western tech companies could learn from. It's wonderful. That's pretty awesome. You pay employees to learn what the international markets look like. You pay them, but you also bring in the international markets to help teach and bring in some of the influencers, and so forth, so that you really understand what it's like to go into these new markets and what people are really like versus saying we're going to bring the American way here and Americanize stuff. That's something that we can learn from. You might have to work a few late nights. Work-life balance is generally worse in China than it is in America. Chinese employees often subscribe to the motto of 996. You work 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. That's a lot of working, guys. Although U.S. and Singapore teams aren't expected to do 996, I work normal U.S. working hours. The reality is that U.S. employees still often attend late night meetings to collaborate with teams in Asia. And that's just what you got to do, guys, in tech in general. I'm like, yeah, you can be a software engineer, you can work remote, but there's times you're going to be working in a different time zone because you have to collaborate with other people in other organizations. I've had meetings with people in Australia, India, China, Singapore, Romania, Kuala Lumpur. And sometimes I got to take those meetings at night, 9 o'clock at night. That's tech. Everybody else is in bed, you're still up, taking a phone call here and there, but you get a big break during the day. That's tech. It's not going to be a perfect situation for anybody. So I want to give you guys the realistic expectations, whether you work for a U.S. company or a Chinese tech company. There are going to be time zones differences, and you're going to have to try to accommodate some of that. Now, it's not to say that you can be up at 1 o'clock in the morning taking a call. No. Make sure everybody respects your time. But yes, there are going to be times when you have to wake up early or go to bed late because you have to accommodate different time zones and so forth. Chinese companies value efficiency and deliverables among all else. Chinese companies also tend to focus less on process and documentation. Documents on how to do things or code and product reviews or outage investigations are often deprioritized in comparison to delivering visible, concrete output like code, product features, and launches. This ruthless, outcome-oriented approach leads to more efficiency, but the lack of documented institutional knowledge also holds back long-term effectiveness of the company. Some of the things that are important are to make sure that others can come behind you and learn from it. And if all that information is in your head, ultimately there could be a brain drain, and ultimately that can lead to a company spiraling out of control. So they focus more on, I want to see results. I want to see results. I want to see results. I think that's something that they could learn from having a balance. Your team sizes will be the size of a football stadium, so they have bigger teams. A lot of these differences can be boiled down to culture, is what it is, guys. And working at a Chinese tech company isn't for everyone. If you are new to the field or have fewer than 5 years of experience, I wouldn't recommend working at a Chinese tech company. The lack of process, mentorship, standardized performance reviews, and internal documentation means that it's harder to learn best practices and mature in your profession. But this situation isn't as bad for senior level later career people who know how to execute. It's an opportunity to learn new ways of doing things, for how Chinese companies design products, to how to test and onboard new users through sheer manpower. I wanted to bring that one to you because there are cultural differences into, different tech companies. There are cultural differences into you being at the same tech company, but how they operate in a different organization or different parts of the world. And some businesses allow for that to happen that way. But you have to have exposure to it. And I wanted to bring that to you, not just from the standpoint of that you may work for a Chinese tech company. You may be working for a tech company that has an office in China or other parts of the world, and you have to learn about their culture. Not to change their culture, but how they operate, so that you can find out the way that you can best work with them. Okay, that's important.